finest community. If you want stability and a place that shows love, you just want to have a good life, come to New West Side. A great place to grow, a great place to know, for you and your family. Near West Side, neighborhood of neighborhoods, where leaders love their people, so come to Near West Side. Please follow, like, and subscribe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our weekly webinar. Today we have a really fun, we're going to be talking to Near West Side staff about recent conferences that we've attended and sharing some of the cool things that we learned and saw along the way. Before we get into the meat of our presentation, I do want to just share some updates from the neighborhood. So for many of you who were here yesterday, you know that we are officially in summer. It's hot, and while the hot weather is definitely nice, it can be dangerous. So we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of some hot weather safety tips. Tips to stay cool, slow down, limit your physical activity, and try to spend as much part of your day in air conditioning as possible. If your home doesn't have air conditioning, you might want to check out a movie theater, a library, or maybe even a mall. To the extent that you can, wear lightweight, loose fitting, and light colored clothes, and take cool baths and showers. And really important throughout the day, stay hydrated, make sure you're drinking plenty of water, whether or not you're thirsty, and never leave children, your pets, or vulnerable adults in parked cars. Especially days like yesterday, temperatures can become life-threatening really quickly. So keep in mind that heat exhaustion can come on in hot days like yesterday, or even days like today where we have a little bit of a break. So some of the warning signs of heat exhaustion look like muscle cramps, feeling tired, weak, or dizzy. Your skin might feel cool and moist even though it's warm outside. And you might notice that your breathing is fast or shallow. And if you notice any of these symptoms, either on yourself or with somebody else, call for medical assistance. In the case of heat stroke, get the person to a shady or cool area. Cool everybody down as rapidly as you can, either in a cool bath or using cool towels. And if you need to have some emergency medical intervention, call the hospital room for additional details. Another great update for the neighborhood, the Hunger Task Force Mobile Market is continuing to visit Penfield Children's Center. They will be there next Tuesday, that should actually say June 28th, not June 11th, at 11 a.m. And everybody can shop at the mobile market. The mobile market has fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, and all sorts of dairy products. And they accept debit cards, credit cards, and Quest EBT. So this is a great opportunity to get fresh foods and fresh produce right here in the Near West Side. And one more update before we move on to our feature presentation. We've mentioned this before in the webinar, but Near West Side Partners' new website includes a community calendar where you can submit your events that are happening in or around the Near West Side. It's also a great place to see what's going on in the neighborhood and keep up to date on what different groups are doing. So definitely check out nearwestsidemke.org, and this will be located under the Visit tab. All right, now on to our team member conference updates. I can't see my screen here, so I'm hoping that Dia and Anne-Marie are joining us, and we may have Keith joining us shortly. We are going to start with Anne-Marie, who's going to tell us about the conference she went to. Then we'll move on to Dia, I'll share, and Keith, and then we'll open it up to some questions and discussion afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. So I'm Anne-Marie Gunn. I'm the Commercial Corridor Coordinator for Near West Side Partners. And the conference that I attended kind of has to do with commercial corridor development. The conference was the Wisconsin Downtown Action Council Conference, and it was sponsored by AARP. It took place May 9th and 10th in downtown Appleton. And basically, those that attended were folks from all over Wisconsin that are either employees of the city, the county, or a nonprofit organization that works with commercial corridor development, so business development or building development. So that's basically what I took from it in terms of networking, trying to figure out who was there. And the idea of the conference was really to share those ideas that we had with each other about how we've implemented different initiatives to develop our areas and just different ways that cities all over Wisconsin could benefit from one another. And I'll share more about the keynote speaker and my takeaways. But these are just some pictures of the tour on the first day that I took. It was of residential properties that have been developed in Appleton over the past 2 years. One of the pictures is of a lobby. So with the green couches, that was actually an Art Deco building that was turned into affordable housing. And then the other picture is actually of a different building, but of one of the apartments that was developed. And so we got to meet with those developers as well and talk about those projects, which was really cool. Then these pictures kind of show the outdoor part of the tour. We were walking through downtown Appleton, and some of the things they pointed out were different art projects they had. So this painted brick wall was actually painted by community members. You know, it was kind of like a paint by number situation, and they activated this empty alley in between some restaurants so that they could use it for outdoor seating or, you know, just have the community utilize that space. So that was really cool. It's something that's really simple to do, but looks really nice. And then the bottom right picture is an example of some signage that they had, which they talked a lot about signage and the different ways that you can have a building, you know, advertise what business is there. And so they were like, stay away from neon lights. And so this was a really cool way, I thought, to advertise a business on a historical building specifically. And so just to get into some of my key takeaways from the conference, Gil Penalosa, who was the founder and chair of 880 Cities, came to present, and he did an amazing presentation with over 400 slides. He had a very fast pace. I couldn't take notes really. It was mainly just listening and having those visuals of what he was talking about. But the idea of 880 Cities is to make cities livable and really promote well-being for 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds. So this idea that if kids and older people are able to feel safe and happy in the cities that they live in, then everyone else will benefit too. And so the idea of making streets safer was a big part of the presentation, because streets are 25 to 30% of the public space. You know, obviously there's parks and other things as well, but focusing that energy on street initiatives was really a big deal. And so making bike paths, expanding sidewalks, really focusing on getting away from driving and promoting other ways to not only exercise, but also other forms of transportation. And he talked a lot about how the pandemic and COVID-19 really made our focus on health, equity, and sustainability something to think about when it comes to how our cities look. And then in terms of implementing these kinds of ideas, you know, you need the hardware, you need the infrastructure of those bike paths and those parks and all those things, but you also need what he called software. So programming those spaces. Once you actually build those spaces, you need volunteers, community members, organizations to step up and say, I'm going to activate this space. I'm going to take part in making sure the community is really coming out and enjoying it. So that was another thing that was a real takeaway from it. And in the picture, I know it's kind of hard to see, but there was impatiens and orchids. So this was kind of the idea that there's different kinds of projects that are both really helpful to think about in terms of impatiens are more short-term, low-cost projects that are easier to implement and can really activate that momentum, I guess you could say, of once you get something done, it's easier to do something bigger. So, and then also combining those smaller projects with long-term higher cost projects. So those are like the 5 years down the road, we want to be able to have a bike path going through the whole neighborhood kind of thing. So really kind of thinking about the variety that needs to happen in order to implement these kinds of things. And then just wanted to share some more like broad takeaways, some projects that I really liked throughout the conference. I went to a breakout session with Economwalk. So the city from Economwalk talked to the employee that was there from that. His name was Bob. I don't remember his last name. I should have looked at that prior to this presentation, so I apologize for that. But he talked about some projects that they've implemented in Economwalk, and one of those was alley enhancement, so similar to that picture that I showed you, and that was with the Community Challenge Grant with AARP, which is just $1,000 that AARP like grants organizations to implement smaller projects. And then I thought it was a great idea that he mentioned of using the utility department to partner for some winter lights throughout the winter, to have those on the corridors and just really make it a brighter space. In Milwaukee, and all over Wisconsin, we talked about winter a lot and how to activate outdoor space during those colder months. So I loved that idea. And then leveraging historical nuggets for events and programming. So Economwalk actually is the first place that the Wizard of Oz was featured. And so they have a festival every year. They have a mural, they have sculptures. So they really took that theme and tried to activate not only with events, but also, art in the community as well. So I love that idea of thinking about in the near West Side specifically what's gone on here that we can kind of leverage and use to host events and to bring art to the community. And then lastly, just some art initiatives we talked about, where having local artists paint picnic tables to make outdoor seating available. And then on the actual tour of Appleton, there was some poetry in the sidewalk. So just having, basic, simple changes to the community that can kind of have that momentum to bring more art into the space. So those are my takeaways. I know that was really fast, but there's obviously a lot of things to get to. So I just thank everyone for joining and listening in, and I will pass it on to Dia.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Hi, my name is Dia Henderson. I am the new Housing Resource Coordinator for the Near West Side Partners, and I attended the ITGA conference. Sorry, just moved my camera here. So ITGA stands for International Towns and Gowns Association. It was actually recent. So June 6th through 8th, I went to Clemson, South Carolina, and joined probably about 200 to 300 community members, community outreach programmers, and higher institution colleagues to come together and try to figure out how we can integrate the community and the higher institutions into our community work. So just a little background. ITGA was formally created as a nonprofit in 2008, but they definitely met before that. And it was in honor of their mayor in Clemson, who was very influential in bringing the community together, and especially with Clemson being such a large institution, having that that connection with the community and the school. And even being there, you can tell like they're very prideful, not only the town, but also the school, like being Clemson, and you see tigers everywhere. So that was really nice to see. And essentially their goal is to provide a network of professional resources, identifying and sharing promising practices, initiatives, and professional development. And I definitely got that while I was there. Not only did I attend, but I also presented with two other Marquette colleagues. So I presented representing Near West Side Partners and Marquette, as I just graduated also. So we presented on the Appreciative Inquiry Summit that Near West Side Partners held last year, just focusing on the great things that we've been doing in the Near West Side, but also giving updates on some of the projects that came out of that. So as you can see, Ben, Pat, and I talked about the Community Corners project specifically, and working on making and protecting our intersections and make sure it's a safe space for people to cross. And then our continued work with the Near West Side and our other projects. I think people were really into our progress as an organization. And we had a lot of people come to our session just to talk about how they've watched us over the years and how they want us to continue to come back to talk about our progression. And then these are just a few pictures. So this is Patton, Ben, and I presenting. And then the picture of the bigger group is the other Jesuit institutions that attended, like Loyola, Georgetown, Villanova. There you go. So like Anne-Marie, I had a few takeaways. One of the biggest takeaways I took from the sessions that I attended was connect with neighbors. Here near West Side Partners, we definitely take that to heart also. We connect with neighbors on a daily basis, whether it's with commercial corridor or safety or any type of outreach. And seeing that with like tying that into a higher education institution, I don't know, let's call it like a realm or a viewpoint. It was very interesting because Marquette also connects with neighbors too. So it was a nice experience to know that what we're doing here in Near West Side Partners is being told everywhere. Also stakeholder engagement. That was another one of the sessions I went to. They talked about how stakeholders, they can give us money, they can give us funds, but they should be involved in the process. They should be there for every step of the way. And in this picture, I actually have one of our stakeholders from Molson Coors, and she was there just to watch our presentation and see how Near West Side Partners and other institutions are handling community outreach. And then one of my biggest takeaways was listen, learn, and build alliances. Again, building community and coming together, not only as a community, but as an office, as an overarching field nonprofit work. We definitely need to build community. We definitely need to come together and brainstorm off of each other. And it was really nice to have the opportunity to get to talk to different people that are doing similar work to myself. Well, thank you. I think passing it on to Lindsey now. Sorry, it was so quick. That was my time in Clemson.
Thank you, Dia. I'm really excited that you had the chance to do that and make that presentation about the Appreciative Inquiry Summit. You know, so much has happened over the course of the last couple months. It's great to be able to showcase the work that we've done. And if anybody has questions for Anne-Marie or Dia, please put them in the comment section or in the chat. When we are done with our presentations here, we will open it up to some questions and some discussion. So I'm Lindsey St Arnold, Associate Director at Near West Side Partners, and I attended the NCRC Just Economy Conference in Washington, D.C. From June 13th through the 14th. And this is my first time at this conference. I was a guest of Bethany Sanchez at the Milwaukee Fair Housing Council. So thank you, Bethany, for the invitation. It was just such an amazing opportunity to be engaged in. So real quick, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition was formed in 1990 by national, regional, and local organizations to increase the flow of private capital to traditionally underserved communities. This was in response largely to the redlining practices and discriminatory lending practices of banks. This was developed as a way to help direct and guide community reinvestment dollars into the communities that actually need them. And the NCRC works with community leaders and policymakers and financial institutions to champion fairness in lending and end discrimination in lending, housing, and business. So I should add, prior to the two-day conference that we had in Washington, D.C., I did have the opportunity to be part of the NCRC Advocacy Day. And Bethany and I met with representatives from our congressional offices to advocate for policies that address specifically discrimination in lending, housing, and business. So we met with with Senator Baldwin's office, Congresswoman Moore, and Senator Johnson's office as well. So it was a really interesting opportunity. I've never been in a position to do some advocacy like that, but it was really neat. So a few quick overview of the NCRC. The overall theme of the conference was, how can we make the economy work for everyone? I attended several sessions over the course of the 2 days, but there were two that were especially impactful and aligned with my work here at Near West Side Partners. The first was about key issues in affordable and fair rental housing. Over a third of all households in the US and almost half of all households in the Near West Side rent. So it's especially important to understand how these issues related to racial justice, housing security, and affordability are factored into the rental market. A couple of key takeaways from this session for me was the underscoring of the fact that we are currently not prepared for the housing security crisis that we're facing and housing security crises to come. And it's concerning because we know the steep penalty of housing related trouble. You know, this looks like inconsistent education, having to stay in unsafe places, and troubles trying to recover from, you know, an eviction or maintain regular employment. So housing really is foundational to the success of not just our communities, but our society. And, you know, we need to find strategies to address the issues that we have and that we're currently facing and will be facing. Some of the recommendations from the panel include reaching people before they are in a housing crisis, providing mobility counseling, which I think is really interesting. These are individuals who would work with you one-on-one to ensure real choice in housing, to help navigate moves, to complete rental applications, and just address other issues that come up during housing transition. At the government level, several panelists talked about implementing fair share planning and zoning regulations. And these would look at the need for affordable housing at a regional and a state level to help define how communities should develop and to ensure that, you know, communities, affordable housing is available in all the areas that need it and aren't being concentrated in just certain parts of the city, county, or state. But, you know, I think the human element is really important here. You know, housing is humanity. Housing should be safe, accessible, affordable, and dignified for people on their own terms. And one of the panelists who I think really did a great job of talking about this was Amanda and Dara from Funders Together to End Homelessness. She talked a lot about how racial discrimination is built directly into the housing market, and specifically about how when we talk about the creation of affordable housing, a lot of times we talk about increasing its presence in or near predominantly white neighborhoods. And she underscored that the reason for this is generally because these communities are better resourced. They have more community serving assets, better schools, things like that. And our failure to provide the same investment in Black and Brown communities, in effect, robs people of the true dignity of choice about where they would want to live, possibly. So, you know, investing and putting resources into communities in an equitable way is going to be really fundamental to ensuring real choice in housing. The other panel that was really interesting to me was titled Radical Goals for Black Homeownership and Affordable Housing. And this one started off with a term that I hadn't heard before, but I think will be especially relevant to Milwaukee over the next 50 years. And that's climate gentrification. And this refers to residential displacement due to climate-driven migration. So for example, people leaving shoreline areas for higher ground, or perhaps people moving to a region with cooler temperatures and fresh water, like Milwaukee. This panel talked a lot about the housing wage, what would be needed to secure affordable housing based on the national average. And as of June 13th, that was $24.90. And I think thinking about arguments in favor of increasing minimum wage is really helpful to think about how housing works into that. There is a lot I could say about this, both in terms of how our artificially low minimum wage kind of creates a corporate welfare state and that we're subjecting people to a sort of indentured servitude. But in the interest of time, I will save that and we can talk about it if you see me. So a key takeaway from this panel that was an important reminder is that wealth isn't created by denying opportunities to others. There is no pie. If we give some more, it doesn't mean that we have less. And we have the tools to do equitable wealth building. The government essentially created the modern housing market as we know it post-World War II. And we need to look at the racial structures that were built into denying opportunities to Black and Brown communities and women, and build the political will to make some real radical changes around lending, housing affordability, housing availability, and home ownership. So that was a lot. A few other short highlights. I got to see a good friend and champion, former DPW Commissioner Karen Detmer, speak on the panel about addressing racial justice through infrastructure, which is another topic I love to discuss. And Anand Girahadis was the keynote speaker on the last day. He's the author of Winners Take All, and he talked about the difference between generosity and justice. And it was interesting, but a little bit hard to hear because of the audio in the room. So I will be picking up that book and reading it soon. So just a few final points before I pass it over to Keith. A reminder that for me, key takeaway, wealth is not created by denying opportunities to people. There is no pie. Housing is foundational, and housing stability is key to consistent and stable healthcare, education. One of the panelists who was part of a session talking about addressing the health disparities due to redlining, made the point of saying race is not a risk factor. The effects of racism is the driver of health disparities. But when we think about, a lot of the issues that, people try to chalk up to racial differences, it can probably be contributed to the structural racism of those policies and procedures. And then finally, the federal government must invest in areas of the market where private developers, even with subsidy, can and or won't reach. And I think this is something that we've been very fortunate to have federal investment and involvement in some of the projects that we're taking on in the Near West Side, and a recognition that, the private market can only do so much, and that, we need to build the political will to really ask our federal leaders to do more to invest and properly resource all of our communities. So again, that was a lot. I will turn it over to Keith. And if anybody has any questions, we can discuss it after Keith's presentation.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying these beautiful presentations. I hope you can hear me, but I'm enjoying them myself. Really exciting. So much to learn. Wow. Now I'm kind of jealous. I wish I could have went on all these conferences, you guys. Amazing job. So I had the opportunity, invited by Rails to Trails Conservancy via Woody Caritas to join a group of us, about 40 of us, to attend to visit the city of Detroit last week, actually, to look at how they're investing in public infrastructure. And we really looked at two areas, the Joe Louis Greenway and the DeQuinder Cut. And really cool. And the DeQuinder Cut, I'll just make sure I get all my words right here. It's 27.5, or I should say, the Joe Louis Greenway, 27.5 miles. Is planned biking and walking trail that extends from Detroit Riverfront to Highland Park, Dearborn, and Hamtramck. It also includes connections along Livernois and McNichols. The Joe Louis Greenway will include the DeQuinder Cut and portions of the Detroit Riverwalk, as well as portions of the planned Iron Bell Trail and the Southwest Greenway. When completed, it will provide a place for people of all abilities to safely walk, bike, run, while connecting neighborhoods, parks, schools, jobs, historic sites, commercial corridors, and public transit. just a really cool space. We did that, explored that pretty much a significant part of Detroit via bike, along with several presentations during the 12th and the 14th. We were joined by, of course, a number of representatives from Rails to Trails, City of Milwaukee, with our good friend Sam Lightning from the Department of City Development, Northwest Side CDC, our sister organization on the Northwest Side of Milwaukee, City of Chicago representatives, and the 30th Street Corridor representatives, among many others, developers, just a host of others, bid managers, and just a really good group of us, about 40. We had several different tours and presentations. Smith Group is actually nationally, if not internationally, architectural firm, and they have an office space in downtown Detroit. They hosted us for those days. Got a chance to go to their beautiful space, older, over 100-year-old building, I think, 1920s building, Art Deco building downtown in Detroit, and got a chance to spend time there on the 18th floor, understanding how the city of Detroit developed this plan for this bike and trail and pedestrian trail. We also participated in the Soul Roll. If you ever have opportunity to see the Soul Roll or participate in Soul Roll, it's the coolest thing ever. Local Detroiters, they dress their bikes up like with Christmas lights and all type of cool things, and they just roll around the city, and they do it right before it gets a little dark, so the bikes begin to get really cool as it gets darker. We also got a chance to visit a number of different sites, including the Eastern Market. We can go to the next slide if we can, unless I have control over it. I think a couple of cool things for me is really seeing how the city of Detroit has taken spaces that was really used for cars and really commandeered those spaces and used them for people. And so they actually, in the city of Detroit, downtown Detroit, not too far from the harbor, it's basically a beachfront, and they brought in sand, and you can go there, you can eat, you can hang out with friends, drink, just have a good time. And it's really a way of awakening spaces that pretty much were dead because of car use, and bringing them back to life. And so you have these zones, as you see in the picture, walk-only zones. There's no biking, it's just walk-only. It's really right in the heart of downtown Detroit. And then on the right, you see the pictures of a picture of the putting planters out, stopping renting cars from coming in certain areas that they usually would come and participate in. Next slide. A couple of pictures I just want to highlight, and then I give my takeaways. In the picture on the left, the city of Detroit have these major 4- and 6-lane thoroughfares that they now have taken and squeezed them down, and they have used bikes and bike lanes that are protected now by infrastructure. You can see plants and gates and other things, and trees protecting families on this trail. And what we found very interesting, as we were walking, many of us just walking, exploring, taking pictures, we saw families actively using the trails, which is just really exciting to see. I mean, families, Black and brown, just everyone enjoying the trails, enjoying the outdoor space. They have the helmets on in all different age ranges, and that was really exciting that because of the public infrastructure investment that we saw, people were actively using the trail. A lot of murals, but just the city of Detroit, the city of Detroit, and I have some takeaways about that. Next slide. So just a couple of takeaways. I had so much, and I'm kind of the student that enjoys being out and about and touching and feeling and understanding, as opposed to being inside the presentation. So being out and about, I was able to tour the city of Detroit with a number of representatives who came with us. And a couple of takeaways, I would just say, there's a lot of people of color leading the charge as far as community development and economic development, improving their communities in that area. And a lot of Black women are just taking the realms and doing what they can to support improvement and changing their community. And on the right, top right, you see a picture. We were introduced to a number of organizers who spoke about their farmers market and their biking classes and yoga class what they're doing to add value and add quality of life to the community. And these are organizers, many who worked for unions back in the day, who are now working just to continue to improve the life of the city of Detroit and the people who live there. Really cool thing too was with the entrepreneurs and community stakeholders, as far as them rethinking and reusing space in very imaginative ways. At the bottom right, you see a picture of me in front of these neon cement concrete designs. And you see that all throughout Detroit, just people recreating, reusing, readapting, rethinking spaces. It's almost like a playground in many respects. And then one that I'm always excited about, last time I visited Detroit was in 2017, was Detroit versus everyone else mentality. And I love that. The t-shirt is very popular that you see in the airports, and many people, Detroiters, wearing Detroit versus everyone else. And I kind of feel there's a rugged spirit there. There's a ruggedness there that I really enjoy. So the highlights is really readaptive, reuse across the city, investment in public infrastructure to get people to using those spaces. The legacy of this great community, I was really impressed to see that people still appreciate and understand the legacy of what Detroit meant to America. There's a lot of great bones still there that people are rethinking on how to use the infrastructure, even the highways, the housing, and then lastly is the spirit of innovation. So I'm gonna shut up. That's what I gathered from my time in Detroit with the wonderful people.
Thanks, Keith. That's really interesting. And I think something that is a big takeaway for me is all the bike infrastructure. Being known as Motor City, to demonstrate that you can scale down your automotive transportation and support other kinds of transportation. And there's a market and an interest in doing that is really interesting.
It was pretty fun, Lindsey, to see that there's this culture embracing this different alternative urban lifestyle. It's not, you see a lot of bikers, a lot of people who are just, they're embracing the shared biking system. So they call it MOGO there. That's the biggest one. And so they're embracing this different lifestyle that usually we assume that's associated heavily, especially in urban areas, with cars and things of that nature. But I think they have an opportunity in Detroit to really explore and be creative, because there's just a lot of space. It's a lot of space. And of course, there's still a lot of issues and challenges as far as coming from a 1.2 million in population city to like less than, I think, 600,000. And so they lost, significant large portion of the population. So they're still grappling with that and what that looks like. It's very interesting.
Very cool.
If you don't mind, Anne-Marie, I'm excited when you mentioned about the keynote presenter and the 400 slides. And I remember in your blog post, you had a couple like quotes is how he viewed, I think, cities and urban dynamic. Do you remember those quotes? Or do you remember what was highlighted? Because I'm interested in your thoughts on, do you think he was onto something in regards to how we should view and look at our cities differently, our urban spaces differently?
Yeah, holding up the blog post real quick just to see if they're.
Sorry for that. I got a preview. I got a preview to read the blog post.
While you do that, Anne-Marie, one of the things I remember you telling me about it was he encouraged people to get down on their knees on the street and look around, because that's what it would look like if you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
And to think about
if you were 3, but yes.
Or if you're 3. Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, having that, I guess it depends on how tall you are, and then if you get on your knees.
I'm more of an 8-year-old.
Yeah. So, and that was really cool to hear about, perspective wise. If you get on your knees and you all of a sudden feel unsafe wherever you are, like that might be an indicator that, in terms of like how the streets look and how traffic looks, like I think we talk a lot about reckless driving in Milwaukee, and that's really scary to be crossing the street if you don't want your elderly grandparent or your kid or your nephew or whatever crossing the street and in Milwaukee, then what kinds of changes do we have to make those people comfortable? And I'm looking back at the blog post. I don't know if I had any direct quotes, but I think I'm just going to skim it real quick. I don't know if there's any other points that
no, other than that, I know you mentioned the 8 to 80. I thought that was pretty cool. I love the fact, and I know you mentioned it in your presentation, about the connection to the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And I think that when we look at our communities, and even we think about Near West Side, I'm hoping that we can continue to embrace this. How do we take those assets that can't be recreated? You know, that we can't take that away from the city of Appleton. We can't. That's theirs. So what is Near West Side? What is our, you know, yellow brick road?
Right.
What can people say? You can't take that away from us. I do have to admit, I've been thinking about it. As a kid of the 80s, I remember watching reruns of Laverne and Shirley, and I think that maybe we may have a connection to beer that we haven't explored fully, that maybe there's a mural or something. We can get a dedicated Laverne and Shirley mural, because if you're right on the eastern edge of Near West Side, you can see the Slitch Park. And so it'd be a great photo op for people who are interested in Slitch Park. Our Slitch at the time was the beer manufacturer that they modeled off of Laverne and Shirley, for those who are around that age. I know I'm dating myself. But anyway, I figured out what can we use to get people excited about the Near West Side. That's our Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. And I remember that Lucas did some research into, you know, Black History Month and things that happened in the Near West Side related to Black history. And was it Nat King Cole that performed at Carpenter Tower? Like, that was such a cool fun fact. And there's so many things that I think that we can use to determine what kind of projects and programming we can do. So yeah, it was a cool takeaway for sure.
I'm so glad that everyone had the opportunity to enjoy themselves at the conference. That's really cool. And I'm glad to hear the turnout. It looks like there was a number of us went with a group of folks who were able to see some things and bring it back to the community.
Yeah, and I appreciate you all sharing your insights. You know, if it wasn't obvious, I left with a lot of thoughts and excitement and enthusiasm for the work that we do, and new ideas on how we can approach things. And I want to share that with you and share it with everybody. I mean, none of this should happen in a vacuum. So I appreciate your willingness to join for the webinar today and share that. Is there any other questions or items for discussion before we call it a day? All right. Well, hearing none, Dia, Keith, Anne Marie, thank you. And everybody who joined us for this webinar, thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you soon in the Near West Side.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.